Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. If you follow the channel, then I mentioned this on Wednesday that I was going to talk about this coming up here in the next couple of weeks. And I was going to wait, but I'm afraid if I do wait, I'll forget about it. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about it today, and I will get into that coming up here very shortly. First, let me say I've got a shout out coming up at the end of the video, so please stay tuned for that. But today, what we're going to be talking about is the history of the college football playoffs, which of course began in 2014. So this year's installment, when it starts in about 3 weeks, will be the 8th year of the college football playoffs. And I'm going to tell you the reason why I'm going to talk about this, and that is because if you follow the channel, you've heard me before say that I will talk college football with anybody as long as they make compelling arguments for whatever they're arguing about or against whatever they're arguing about. But when they have no argument and they just say something stupid because they want to prove a point, but they don't have no merit behind their point, and they just say something stupid, I don't even talk to them because it's a waste of time. Because if you can't even get enough energy up to watch film and watch teams and watch stuff to have a reason for your argument, then you shouldn't make one in the first place. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when the playoffs start in 3 weeks, in the first round we've got Alabama and Cincinnati. And shouldn't anybody should have anything to say about the game, then you shouldn't say it. Because this has been the most unpredictable year in the history of college football. So whatever you think is going to happen, it's probably not going to happen. So if you think, oh, this is going to happen, it's probably going to be the exact opposite that's really going to happen. But still, people are going to say, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And the reality of it is, we don't know. But let's just say that Alabama destroys Cincinnati. I'm not saying they will. The game is still 3 weeks away. I'm nowhere near ready to even think about making a prediction. I won't even think about it until at least the week of the game, if not the day before the game. But there's going to be some people out there that's going to say, Alabama's going to destroy Cincinnati. And let's say they do. Who cares? So today, I'm going to show you the history of the college football playoffs. And this is just so that if by some chance Alabama destroys Cincinnati, it doesn't matter. It does not take away from the year Cincinnati has had. Now, anybody that knows college football can watch Cincinnati and tell you they're a good team. I don't give a darn who their coach is. I don't give a darn what conference they're in. If you can't watch Cincinnati and tell me they're a good football team, then you don't know college football. They have the best secondary in college football. That's inarguable. It's not close. They have the best secondary in college football. So they have athletes on the field. Just because they're Cincinnati and just because they play the AAC does not mean they have no talent. But there will be people that don't want Cincinnati in the playoffs. So just because of that, even though they have no merit on why they shouldn't be in the playoffs, they're going to say, oh, well, it's Cincinnati. That doesn't matter. That does not mean they can't be good just because they're Cincinnati. So today I'm going to run over all the playoff games we've had so far and talk about all the teams that have lost by at least 20 points in a playoff game. Because you would think if it's the 4 best teams year in, year out, that every game would be not necessarily down to the wire, but at least a fourth quarter game. I mean, that's not so. So if by some chance Alabama destroys Cincinnati and beats them by 20-plus points, Cincinnati will not be the first team in the playoffs that has lost a game by 20 or more points. So if you want to follow along, feel free to do so. I'm not going to break down every single game. I'm just going to give you the scores of every single game. We'll start with 2014. We had Oregon beating Florida State by 39 points. Oregon 59, Florida State 20. And then we had Ohio State that year beat Bama in the first round by a touchdown, 42-35. And then in the national championship game, Ohio State beat Oregon 42-20. So if you want to follow along, just in the year 2014, we had Florida State losing by 39 and Oregon losing by 22. And then in 2015, we had Clemson beating Oklahoma by the score of 37-17. And then we had Alabama beating Michigan State 38-0. So we don't have to discuss the national title game that year. We know it was Bama and Clemson, and we know it came down to the very end, so it wasn't a blowout. And then in 2016, we had Bama beating Washington by 17 by the score of 24-7. And then we had Clemson beating Ohio State by the score of 31-0. And then, just like in 2015, Bama and Clemson played for the national title, and it came down to the wire again, so we won't take time to talk about that one. And then 2017 so far has been the outlier, where every game was not necessarily down to the wire, but at least within 20 points. We had Alabama beating Clemson in the first round that year by the score of 24-6. And then we had Georgia beating Oklahoma 54-48, and of course that was the year Bama and Georgia played for the national championship. And then 2018 we had Bama beating Oklahoma 45-34, and then we had Clemson beating Notre Dame 30-3, and then we had Clemson beating Bama by 28 in the national championship game. So even the national championship game that year was a blowout. Clemson won by 28. And then 2019, we had LSU beating Oklahoma by 35 points by the score of 63-28. And then we had Clemson beating Ohio State 29-23. And then LSU beat Clemson by 17 for the national championship. And then last year, we had Bama beating Notre Dame by 17, 31-14. And then we had Ohio State beating Clemson by 21, 49-28. And then in the national championship game, Bama beat Ohio State by 28 by the score of 52-24. So if you followed along, you see there's 10 games in 7 years, which is more than one game a year. Basically, almost half of the college football playoff games so far have been decided by 20 or more points. We had Florida State, we had Oregon in 2014, and then we had Oklahoma and Michigan State in 2015, and then we had Ohio State in 2016. And then in 2018, we had Notre Dame and Alabama. And in 19, we had Oklahoma. And last year, we had Clemson and Ohio State again. So if by some chance Alabama destroys Cincinnati and beats them by 20-plus points, if anybody comes to you and says, well, I told you Cincinnati shouldn't be there, they got destroyed, you know what you can tell them? Well, if that's the case, then Florida State should never go again. Michigan State should never go again. Oklahoma should never go again. Ohio State should never go again. Alabama should never go again. Clemson should never go again. Michigan State should never go again. So it's not like if by some chance Bama destroys Cincinnati, that Cincinnati is going to be the first team in the history of the playoffs that's lost by 20 or more points. That is not the case. Every single year so far, except for 2017, there has been at least one playoff game that's been decided by 20 or more points. So you have a better chance that it'll happen again this year in one of the games than you do that it won't happen this year. Now, I hope it doesn't. I want to see 3 great playoff games, both in the first round and then the title game. But just because I want that, history shows you that more than likely I won't get that. That at least one of these games is going to be a blowout. Which kind of goes back to the argument that I've been making ever since about the middle of June, that I don't think the college football playoffs need to expand. You think about it. If you've only got 4 teams in the college football playoffs, and every single year at least one of the games, if not 2, is a blowout, if you expand the playoffs to 12 teams, you're going to have about 4 or 5 games that are just going to be utterly laughable. And the playoffs shouldn't be like that. They should be good games. But generally, 99% of the time, there's only about 3 elite teams in college football. And then 4 through 14, they're generally all pretty even. And then 15 on back, they're generally all pretty even. But most years, there's never 4 elite teams. So if you can't get 4 elite teams, you sure can't get 12 elite teams. So unless you enjoy seeing teams just get blown off the field, then you shouldn't be for the 12-team playoff. Because if you're seeing blowouts with 4 teams, you're going to see blowouts with 12 teams. And what's the point in watering down the regular season and then going to the playoffs and then playing a playoff game, and then by halftime, the game is over? When people sit down to watch a playoff game, whether you've got a dog in the fight or not, you want to see a good game. I've talked to people who are actually fans of teams, whatever the team is. I've heard Georgia fans say it. I've heard Clemson fans say it. I've heard Georgia Tech fans say it. I've heard Oregon fans say it. That even if they're watching their team play, and their team is winning at halftime and it's 31-0, that they'll just go ahead and find something else to do or watch another game, because even though their team is winning, what's the fun in watching the game when the game is not even close? Now, me, I'm not that way. I don't care if Clemson plays a middle school team and they win 500-0. When Clemson plays, I watch the entire game in its entirety from the first snap to the last snap. That's just me. But not every fan is like that. I have talked to some fans that will say if their team is winning in a blowout, I don't watch it. Because, yeah, I want them to win, but I want to see some action. And you know if the game is over at halftime, the second half is just going to be a bunch of bland, like watching spring football. And most people don't want to watch that. So when you sit down to watch a playoff game, especially if you don't have a dog in the fight and you're just sitting down to watch a good playoff game, you want to see a good playoff game. You don't want to see a score of 59-20 or 44-16 or 52-24. Nothing like that. You want to see a down-to-the-wire football game. So if by some chance Bama beats Cincinnati by more than 20 points and anybody says to you, well, see there, they couldn't even compete, it doesn't matter. Every year, somebody in one of the playoff games gets blown off the field. Now, we might talk more about not just that game, but that game as well as the Georgia-Michigan game as it gets closer, but it's still 3 weeks away, and a lot can change in 3 weeks. So I'm not even going to waste my time talking about it right now. I just wanted to go ahead and bring that up because of the fact I was looking over the history of the college football playoffs and seeing how many years and how many games there were blowouts. And I thought, you know what? I know already I can see that if Bama beats Cincinnati by 20 or more points, somebody is going to say that because they want to have an argument for Cincinnati to not be in the playoffs, and they don't have one because they're deserving of a playoff spot. So their argument's going to be, well, they couldn't even hang with Alabama if they get destroyed. So if anybody says that and you hear them say that, that can be your argument. Whether you're a Cincinnati fan or not, just, you ain't got to be a fan. Just be real with them and say, look, if you look over the history of the playoffs, this happens every year. Cincinnati is not the first team to get blown out, and they won't be the last team to get blown out. It happens, and it's going to continue to happen. So if you have any thoughts on not just the history of the playoffs, but what you think will happen this year in the playoffs, feel free to let me know. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the NFL best of and worst of. And what I mean by that, if you follow the channel, you know back during the college football season in September and October before the playoff poll came out, every single week when the AP poll came out, I would talk about it and also tell you who I thought were the 10 best teams as of that week. And my opinion changed weekly based on how the team played that week. So I know the NFL started their new week last night with the Thursday night game, but Pittsburgh or Minnesota were not going to be on my list, so I'm not worried about that game. But as we head into a Sunday of NFL Week 14 action, I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, who are the best 5 teams right now and the worst 5 teams right now. And it has nothing to do with the record. It's just how they're playing as of right now. So, of course, just like the AP poll, it could change on a weekly basis. But there's been so much going on right now, I haven't had a lot of time to actually sit and talk about the NFL. So I figured I would just tell you my top 5 best and top 5 worst. So we'll do that in tomorrow's video, so please stay tuned for that. Any thoughts on who you think are the best 5 and the worst 5 right now, please feel free to let me know. My shout out today goes out to my man Christopher, who lives in the upstate of South Carolina. He subscribed to the channel on Wednesday night. He is a Braves fan, a Clemson fan, and a NASCAR fan. So I told him we talk about the Braves, we talk Clemson, and we talk NASCAR during NASCAR season. So he should enjoy the channel. Christopher, thank you so much for subscribing. Always love having new subscribers, and if you do so choose to comment on any video at any time, you will be eligible for our 1,000 subscriber giveaway that we'll be having when we get to 1,000 subscribers. So spread the word about the channel, tell your family, tell your friends, give the video a thumbs up, and again, thank you for subscribing. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. How much does Santa pay to park the sleigh? Nothing. It's on the house. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.